Hello, this is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com coming to you on the 29th of April 2011 here in Japan, and today I'm joined from Buenos Aires, Argentina by Adrian Salbuchi, an independent analyst and thinker and writer, and someone who has come up with a very exciting way for tackling and defeating the New World Order. So Adrian Salbuchi, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us once again.
My pleasure. How are you, Jim?
Well, I'm doing well, thank you, and I certainly hope things are going okay for you there in Argentina. But I'm sure many of my viewers and listeners are probably already familiar with you, either from our previous conversation or through your very popular videos. But for those people who aren't familiar yet, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, basically, I'm based here in Argentina. I've lived abroad. I've lived in the United States. I've lived in Britain and sometime also in Germany. And I'm an independent consultant on risk management and financial matters. And having lived practically all of my adult life in Argentina, we've gone through a lot of systemic collapses, government takeovers, monetary collapses, hyperinflation, and many of the things that have happened to us throughout the decades seem to be small-scale tests or experiences of what later or now is starting to happen on a global basis. So what we've done is we pretty much scratched our heads and wondered why it all happened, how it all happened, who made it happen, and you start getting some conclusions from that. And from those conclusions, we are building a model that enables people, I think now the world over, before it was just Argentinians, now it's people the world over, it enables people to understand how that model works. And once you understand how a model works, Jim, it automatically becomes predictable. And predictability allows you to do strategic planning.
Very, very good points. Yes, absolutely. Well, today we're going to be talking about your idea for a second republic, but I guess before we get into the details of what that is and what that entails, we should first define why we need a second republic. What is it that we're trying to construct the second republic against?
Well, the basic idea, actually, let me just rewind for a second there. The last time Argentina had a major collapse was in 2001, 2002. We had a full-fledged banking collapse, we had a full-fledged monetary collapse, and the economy was so badly impacted by this that gross domestic product fell 40% in 1 year, and half of our population fell below the poverty line. That meant the lower middle class, and most of them did not make it back. So that was very traumatic. And at that time, we were quite active trying to promote what we called the, well, it would translate from Spanish as the Argentine Second Republic movement. And the rationale behind it was that for various reasons, which would be too lengthy to explain and very specific to Argentina, we realized that our nation state, our public institutions, had for one reason or another been hijacked by seen and unseen forces. Let's simplify it by saying the banking cabal, the international bankers and so forth, through Argentina's foreign public sovereign debt. So we said, okay, so the problem, we defined it the following way. The problem with Argentina nowadays, which by the way is an immensely, almost incalculably wealthy country, the problem with Argentina is that our nation state, instead of providing for the common good of the people and defending the national interest, has slowly transformed into a colonial administration entity. In other words, our public government, our nation state, became an administration entity for the global power elite. So we said, okay, what we need to do is drop the present Argentine Republic and found or refound a second republic. And we used as an example France. France, since the French Revolution, has gone through several republics, and they're now actually in the Fifth Republic. Right after the Second World War, well, the Fourth Republic was horrendous because it was founded after the Second World War, after the German invasion from 1940 to 1944. It was all very traumatic, and the country became chaotic. And it was in 1957 that a true statesman, Charles de Gaulle, proposed founding a fifth French Republic, In other words, dealing the cards once again, so that would finally get France on its feet. And now they've had a lot of problems, but we must admit that since 1958, when the Fifth French Republic was founded with a new constitution, France has not done badly, and they have been the ideological powerhouse of what later was to become the European Union. So it hasn't gone bad for them.
Well, yes, very interesting. So you're talking specifically, and you're writing and thinking in the Argentinian context, but this is an idea that transcends those national boundaries.
Yeah, well, let me tell you why it actually started transcending it. We've done quite a lot down here. We haven't been able to obviously set up a strong political entity because you need tons of money for that. And we figure whoever puts the money in will want to call the shots. So we're trying to do this rather heroically on a personal initiative basis with all the people, all the more humble working people down here that are part of the Argentine Second Republic movement. But what happened was that at the beginning of last year, in March of 2010, I was invited by a very close friend of mine who happens to be Canadian also, as yourself, Philip Jarman, who has a private financial consultancy. He invited me to a meeting, a commercial meeting in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And at that meeting, there were basically two speakers, G. Edward Griffin, whom I admire enormously, who's the expert probably on the Federal Reserve Bank, and myself. And to make a long story short, we discussed everything. And during my presentation, I said, well, in Argentina, we had all these problems, and we reached the conclusion that since our country had been transformed into a colonial administrative entity, we had to found a second republic. And the idea caught on, and what we did is we decided, a small group of us, and we're working very hard at this, to create Second Republic, the concept, which we applied to Argentina until that time, to apply it as a sort of template, because there are 5 basic pillars around which Second Republic rallies, and they are basically the same for just about any country. The details will naturally change because each country has its own problems, its own characteristics, but the basic idea would still hold. So we found it, and we have actually a website on this, which is Second Republic Project altogether, secondrepublicproject.com, which we are building. And we've already placed in that site 5 videos describing the 5 basic pillars. And we're starting to put a series of white papers into that site so that people from the world over will be able to, become members or founding members, so to speak, and also start learning about at least what our proposal is all about and seeing how they can apply it to their specific countries based on their specific problems and their specific history.
All right, then, well, let's start getting into some of the details of what you're talking about here. You mentioned there are 5 pillars to the Second Republic idea. Tell us about those pillars.
Yeah, before I do that, let me just very basically say why we arrived at those 5 pillars. First of all, what we did here in Argentina, Jim, was use absolute common sense. So we figured, okay, let's start by understanding how the world really works, which is not the way the BBC and CNN and Fox News and the New York Times and the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal tells us that as it works. Let's really understand how the world works, how power has been privatized, how governments, even Mr. Obama and even Mr. Cameron in Britain, no longer call the shots, that there are entities above the public nation state in every country who are really calling the shots, and we call it the privatization of power. So let's start by understanding how the world really works. When you understand the way the world really works, that leads you to a second point. You start understanding why your country is in such dire states, whether it be in America, Argentina, Brazil, Indonesia, Malaysia, where we have a lot of very good friends, Japan, I suppose, as well, although I'm not very knowledgeable about the Japanese scene specifically. So you start understanding why we are in such dire states. Straits. And when you do that, you start understanding why the global power elite want you and me and all your viewers to think and behave in a certain set of ways, and at the same time they don't want us to think and behave in certain other alternative ways. So we scratched our heads and said, well, come on, if we understand what they don't want us to do, or what they want us to do rather, let's do exactly the opposite. So, for example, and here come the 5 pillars. They don't want any country to have a sovereign nation state, which is the sole republican institution that will promote the common interest and promote the common good and defend the national interest. So let's found a second republic. Let's found a new sovereign nation state. That's the basic idea behind a second republic. Second pillar. The most important thing that a sovereign nation state has to do is recover its national currency, not the way it's been hijacked in America by the Federal Reserve, or in Europe through the European Central Bank, or in Argentina through a privately controlled, even though formally public, central bank. Third, reject the debt-based economic system, which in the case of Argentina would mean investigating our sovereign public debt, which is totally fraudulent from the very beginning. Probably in other countries it would be different. Probably in America it would mean auditing the Fed, and maybe in Europe it would mean something different. But all countries have that debt-based economic system that we must reject. The fourth pillar is let's recover our republican institutions. The way so-called democracy works is that they use the entire political structure and they make it subordinated to and dependent on money. Now, money is not democratic. So if we have a so-called democratic system dependent on money, that's no democracy at all, or even worse still, it's the best democracy that money can buy. And the fifth and last pillar is they have totally turned our values upside down. Let's put them right side up again. This is a very short and compressed description, but when you start looking at those 5 pillars, they will give you a basic model through which you can put just about any problem that any country will have, and one way or another, the common sense solution will shine through of its own. You don't need rocket science for this. It's just basic common sense applied to people thinking with our own minds and not with the global power elite's minds through all the rubbish they sell us in, as I say, in their mainstream media.
Well, I realize that is kind of the whirlwind overview of the 5 pillars, so let's get a little bit more into the details. Just listening to that overview, it does strike me, and I'm sure many of the viewers, that finance and the national monetary system is a key part of this. Tell us more about your what you envision would be a type of currency and debt or non-debt-based money that would actually work to empower the people rather than enslave them.
Yeah, that's probably the crucial point, because it's like the old saying from Lord Rothschild from the 19th century: "Give me the power to handle a country's money, and I don't care who governs, who makes its laws, etc." That's been repeated hundreds of times. But really, controlling the currency of a country and the monetary supply and the monetary system gives you almost complete power. And what we say is, let's start by making a strict distinction between public money and private money. Public money is the dollars or the pesos or the yen that we all have in our wallets. And that has a particularity that very often people forget. Public money belongs to the people. It's like the national territory. If you are a Japanese or a Canadian citizen, you can say, well, all of Canada belongs to the Canadians, which doesn't mean that all Canadians have the same allotted space. A lot of people have a lot of land in Canada, and maybe others don't even have their own home. But that's not the point. The point is that Canada belongs to the Canadians, irrespective of how you might split up the Canadian territory. The same thing with public money. Public currency, public money, belongs to we the people. It does not belong to the banks. It does not belong to anybody to fiddle around with it. Independent of the fact that a lot of people are millionaires and maybe other people have little money in their own wallets. But the key point is that public money, since it belongs to the people, it is a public utility, so to speak, and it should not generate interest. If you have 100 peso bill or 100 yen bill in your wallet and you leave it there for a year, there's no reason why you should expect it to reproduce itself, and in a year's time you should have 110 yen or 120 yen. It will still be the same monetary value. Private money, however, which is the banking money created by the banking system, which as a whole, perhaps not any bank individually, but as a whole, through fractional lending creates money out of nothing, not only do they create private money out of nothing, which are just blips on your computer screen or perhaps a printout on your banking statement or in other more sophisticated financial instruments and financial media, but on top of it, they create the money out of nothing and they charge you interest for it. So definitely the problem is, and this is the way we see it, and I think it helps to explain the global financial collapse of 2008, is that the banking cartel need to take over the public monetary entity and the public monetary system, ensuring that there is never enough public non-interest bearing money for all the needs of the real economy. And since there is not enough public money, in they come and say, don't worry about it. You need money, I'll loan you the money. And they loan you the money by creating it scripturally out of nothing. And on top of it, they will charge you interest. So what they do in the long run is they generate an entire economic system which is based on debt. We're all indebted. The nation states are indebted. Look at America, $14 trillion or $14.5 trillion national debt. Corporations are indebted. Individuals are indebted. Credit cards, mortgages, car loans, etc. And the key question is, the entire planet is indebted, but indebted with whom?